Okay, this information is a little bit dated, but I think their projections out until a couple years ago. But I think it's very good in terms of kind of understanding what's going on. So I know a lot of people are very concerned about whether or not there will be any money left in the trust fund by the time um, they reach Social Security. So first of all, let's talk about what the problem statement is, and then let's talk about ultimately how it's going to affect you. So if you look at the years 1985, let's say to 2007, roughly, those are the years that the baby boomers were still earning income, right? And so, because there were lots of them coming out of the end of World War II, there was people were having bigger and bigger families. There was more income and more prosperity for certain groups of people. So, the population really grew quite large, and as a byproduct of that, we had a very large group of people in the workforce. So those people were paying into Social Security, and there were many more of them than the people who were taking out, because those people were coming out of, for the most part, tougher times, right? And so family sizes were not as big, and there was not a boom in the population, right? Like the next generation would have. So as you can see, up until sometime in the early 2000s, there were lots of individuals who were paying in more, and so we had a surplus, right? This is when people talk about the Social Security surplus. That's what we're talking about, is we had more money coming in than going out. Well, that shifted as those baby boomers started to retire because those large groups of populations moved from paying in to being paid out. And that's what we see here in the dark red is sort of the periods that have actually happened, and the periods that were projected are to the right from roughly 2014 to 2023. And these projections ended up panning out, right? And so as a byproduct of that, the surplus that we generated in all the prior years was being consumed by having to pay more than what was coming in. And so, so that surplus is being eaten away. And according to the latest figures, given that the Social Security Fairness Act passed, it actually made the problem slightly worse. I don't want to create any anger or towards those people because it's not their fault that the policy changed. But it did eat away some of that an additional amount of that surplus for that roughly 2.7 million people who are going to get an increased benefit. So with that said, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what does all this mean? And for me and my benefit, right? Well, what it means is the portions of your Social Security that are funded by the surplus, which is roughly currently it's between 20 and 18 and 23%, right? That piece is at risk. Okay. It's not the entire Social Security. The amount that you paid in, that's guaranteed for you, which is roughly between 75 and 80%. That piece is solid, and there is not an immediate risk in that area. What if there is a risk is in this roughly 18 to 24%, right? And so if you have a projected payment at full retirement of $2,500, which is a number I consistently use, then what we're saying is that, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 or slightly less than 80% of that amount, you should feel comfortable that you're going to get. That's about $2,000 a month. The rest of that 5%, or that 5,000, the extra $500, if we don't make changes to the program before the surplus runs out, which is currently estimated roughly around 2034, then 20% of your, roughly 20% of your benefit is at risk, and you will not get at 20%, right? And so, it is important that over the next 9 years that Congress considers this, thinks about how they're going to handle it. And there are many approaches. I'm glad to discuss any of those approaches with you, but I wanted to at least give you the peace of mind to know that roughly 80% of your benefit is going to be good. 20% is the piece that's at risk. And this sort of explains why that 20% is at risk.